Hello, BookTube. Well, our streak continues just a bit. No books today, but periodicals. I got 3 periodicals in the mail, and we have some fun looking at those together. I've already glanced at these, and I know that there is some bad news, at least for me, at least in my terms. But there is good news. There's the Vineyard Gazette, the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, the old broadsheet style newspaper of Martha's Vineyard, the island off the coast of Massachusetts. I'm pretty sure that I'm not in this issue, but it will have its usual nature-related delights. So that'll be great. The front part, the news parts of the Vineyard Gazette, finally do have news to relate. A small town island newspaper will often not have any news to relate. But in this case, it does, because Martha's Vineyard is a vacation resort, and it is now being forced to contemplate the possibility that there won't be any vacations this year. That the tourist season that's set to start in just a couple of weeks, despite the fact that it's freezing cold here and dark as twilight and sleeting almost every day, that tourist season is what a lot of island businesses rely on, and it looks like they might not get it. So that is becoming, pandemic begins to reshape the landscape of summer. Who knows how the Vineyard will cope? I am very much concerned. I love the Vineyard, so we shall see. And then the next periodical, ordinarily it would bring me great joy. It's the New York Review of Books. But this issue does not bring me great joy, because I've mentioned before that one of the things that I tend to do with literary periodicals is look to see if there's anything in the table of contents that I'm going to find personally off-putting. In other words, a book that's reviewed that was written by someone I hate, or a review that was written by someone that I don't want to read, that I just don't want to read. And unfortunately, this issue is so rife with them that I am going to pursue a course that I hate to do, absolutely hate to do it, but I know the alternative. And that course is, I'm just going to ignore this. I'm going to throw it out. I'm not going to read anything in it. The whole thing. There are enough people in it that I don't want to read, that I don't think should be in it, that I don't want pontificating to the world in the pages of the New York Review of Books or being reviewed in the New York Review of Books. That there are enough of those people in this. It's just bad luck. That's all. It's crammed from front to back with people that would taint the reading experience for me. And there's hardly anything in it that I can see that wouldn't do that. So I'm not going to bother. I would be tempted to read stuff that would annoy me, and that would just ruin the experience. So unfortunately, through bad luck only, I've got a New York Review of Books that I just have to throw in the garbage unread, and that hardly ever happens. That's happened only a few times in the whole time that the periodical has existed. But there is an upside, which is that the coast is completely clear for the new TLS, the Times Literary Supplement. This is just going to be a fun issue for me, and that's great because I'm going to need it. And I was thinking last time we talked about the Times Literary Supplement, we mentioned the late critic George Steiner has been talked about often in the letters page, of people accusing him of being the author of his own problems, or people accusing Cambridge University of being anti-Semitic for not proffering his career plans, and people defending and criticizing him left and right. And I kind of assumed with the last issue, the one that I read you, that the letter they printed would be the end of the story, but no, it's kept going. And that's one of the things that amazes me about letters columns in literary journals, is that often these discussions will go on for weeks and months. The thing that bothers me about them, I love reading them, I absolutely love them. I also love predicting them. I love seeing if I can call something that is going to cause a controversy. I would never in a million years have guessed that George Steiner would be such a thing. But one of the things that concerns me about it is that these things aren't preserved. There's by now there's a long and very interesting discussion going on here about George Steiner that some future biographer of George Steiner is going to want to know about. They're going to want to consult these things. And I don't know that there's any mechanism for them to do that other than just pouring through every back issue of the TLS. As far as I know, only one of these letter column brouhahas was ever actually immortalized in a book. And that was the long debate between Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Dawkins about punctuated equilibrium, about evolution. I think that was made into a little booklet, if I remember correctly. But I can't remember off the top of my head many other examples. And all this stuff about George Steiner, some future George Steiner scholar might miss these things. And that worries me. But this has a couple more pieces about George Steiner. They aren't taking up the question of anti-Semitism or of his career path at all. They're just writing anecdotes about him, people remembering him, which is kind of interesting. I'm wondering how long that will go on. I'm wondering if that whole disagreement, that whole argument in the letters page has just opened up to people viewing it as just an invitation to reminisce about George Steiner. That would be wonderful. I would take months more of that if that turns out to be true. But the thing I want to read you is from the JC's column, NB, at the back of the issue. JC's identity is not disclosed by the TLS, and it's just 4 or 5 squib pieces, like 200 words on one subject, 200 words on another. Sometimes controversial, sometimes pugnacious, and other times not. And one of the first squib here brings up an author who's come up on this channel a couple of times, John Dos Passos, and specifically his USA trilogy. And we have here writers who are more or less forgotten. Number 7, this is one of their ongoing things. Had not the line of succession been interrupted by the Second World War, John Dos Passos might have been in line for a Nobel Prize after his panoramic trilogy USA was published in a single volume in 1938. Not that the Swedish Academy would heed the TLS, but the reviewer here called it, quote, the nearest approach to the great American novel. We've heard that kind of thing since, but in the case of USA, it has some purchase. The title itself makes that claim, as does the consciously American form invented by Dos Passos, the camera eye or newsreel interludes spooling out headlines, together with snatches of popular song and other found objects, all arranged as collage. Dos Passos' earlier novel, Manhattan Transfer, was, if anything, more experimental, described in the TLS again as, quote, one of the few really satisfactory contrapuntal novels of our time. So the JC is trying to point out here subtly that the TLS has always been right about John Dos Passos. Dos Passos lived until 1970, and if the Swedes were minded to ignore us, they might have heeded Jean-Paul Sartre, who admired Dos Passos, and William Faulkner, who borrowed from both, or Albert Camus, who owed so much to Hemingway. All those mentioned were awarded the Nobel, except Dos Passos. A man of the left during his 20s and 30s, he traveled to the Soviet Union in 1928, one of the first Western writers to do so. He was disillusioned by what he saw, as he was by the corrupting influence of the Russians on the Republican side during the Spanish Civil War. In Spain, he fell out with Hemingway. By 1960, Dos Passos was campaigning for Richard Nixon against John F. Kennedy. We hate to resort to the tired rhetorical device, quote, who reads Dos Passos now? But there is more applicability in this case than in others. USA you might find somewhere in a dusty 20-year-old Penguin. I once had an olive green spine trade paperback of USA. Don't think I have it anymore. But his dozen other novels have disappeared. The first of them was One Man's Initiation, 1917. The Initiation was the First World War, in which Dos Passos served. It was published 100 years ago, making this a centennial year. If Dos Passos is more or less forgotten elsewhere, he is at least a little bit remembered here. Well, that's kind of fun. Now, this issue itself has a concentration. Almost every TLS issue has a concentration of some kind or another. They don't turn over the whole issue to the concentration, but they sometimes will hold on to reviews if they sense a theme, and then they will build up a kernel of a concentration in an issue. And the concentration here is history. So let's see, as I've got you here, and we're not going too long, let's see what history they review. We can just stroll through here without needing to worry about encountering frauds or charlatans. Love in the Blitz by Eileen Alexander. Why Bowie Matters, that's not exactly history. Diary of a Foreigner in Paris. Curzio Malaparte. Wow, Ian Baruma reviews the book I was just talking about on this channel. Oh wow! And now I get a chance. Now I won't feel like I'm excluded. I'll get a chance to read what Baruma thinks and see. Then we have Gary Sheffield reviewing Dresden, The Fire and the Darkness, and The Crew, the story of the Lancaster bombing crew, together in one book. And I haven't read The Crew, but I have read The Fire and the Darkness. And then let's see here. Linda Kinsler reviews, looks like 5 books on Auschwitz. And Carolyn Moorhead reviews And in the Vienna Woods, the Trees Remain. Oh, great. In the middle of every issue, there's a freelance piece. I haven't read this issue yet, but in the middle of every issue, there's a freelance piece. And this one is Will Self writing about Grub Street, writing about being a working freelancer, who I don't imagine that he is anymore. He probably takes every freelance job that's offered to him, but he is a bigger rung of success now. So that's going to be great. Reading that is going to be absolutely fascinating, and the rest of it too. I will report back next week when we get the next TLS. I'll report back on this one, but that is the mail. I seriously don't think I'm going to get any books today in the mail. How sad. But I'm just reminding myself that from 2016 to 2019, there were days when I got no books in the mail. That did happen. It doesn't require a pandemic to cause that to dry up. So we'll see. Maybe tomorrow there'll be books. At least I still had company with you going through my mail with me, which gives an old man's heart a little burst of delight. So thank you for that. I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.